Hey lovelies, how's it going? Hope all is well. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here to discuss this video that I've just seen online. Now it is trending everywhere and it's causing a lot of us to talk about the term African American versus Black. So I decided to go ahead and do a video about this. These are all my opinions. I will put the sources down below so you guys can look them up for yourself. But I just want to talk about this because this is actually a great conversation.
What does an African American woman look like? Like me?
No, but there's no such thing as an African American woman. They made that up.
Okay, so we're all Africans.
They are American. They were born here. They're American, but they're dumb, and so they're calling themselves African Americans because they don't think for themselves. You don't even look like them. Why would you want to attach that to your name?
You know, you are very special.
Do much better and sooner if you didn't have the Afro-Latina.
No. I will always be Afro-Latina, and that's why I'm an activist. I love my melanin. I love my background. I love my race.
But don't put the Afro stuff. You hurt yourself.
Never.
Believe me.
Oh, okay.
Because they're never going to accept you.
Oh, well, then I have another option but to. See, I'm breaking barriers and it's working.
If you just be you.
I am me.
But don't do the Afro thing, because blacks only get in these positions because of their color, not because they're qualified.
Oh, okay.
They get into
like
university.
You're not qualified to be here now?
Yeah, because I'm not into the Afro thing.
So African Americans are sometimes referred as Black Americans or Afro Americans. There are two different definitions for African Americans. One, you will have African Americans are an ethnic group of Americans with total or partial ancestry from racial groups in Africa. And then the other terms are African Americans are descendants of enslaved Black people who are from the United States. The reason why they use the entire continent of Africa instead of the country, for example, Irish American, is because slave masters purposely wiped out tribal ancestry, language, and family units in order to destroy the spirit of the people they enslaved, thereby making it impossible for their descendants to trace their history prior to being born into slavery. So till this day, we don't know if we want to be called Black or African American. So I am going to do a little history of before Christopher Columbus and after Christopher Columbus.
Remember the phrase, black is beautiful? Well, today the color may still have its virtue, but the name, as used to identify people of African descent, is now part of a prickly dispute. Marcus Jones has our story.
What's in a name? That's what the nation's black community is debating these days. Jesse Jackson is urging blacks to begin referring to themselves as African Americans. Historian Robert Hayden supports that idea.
A lot of people have been calling themselves African American or African Americans for years. Many of our college university programs, as at Northeastern, is the Department of African American Studies. People of African descent here in Boston in the 17 and 1800s were using the term African to talk about their social groups and their religious groups. We had the African Meeting House, so I think it's probably the most accurate and most useful term for people whose ancestors came from sub-Saharan Africa.
2010, the Black population in the United States was introduced to a new study, and with this data, they wanted to see how we identified ourselves. So with this simple report, they found out a lot of African American people related to themselves as Kenyan and Nigerian, and also as Haitian and Jamaican. They also found out that the word African American and Black is used by us interchangeably. Now, here comes the debate.
Elma Lewis, a leader in Boston's cultural community, is opposed to adopting a new identification for blacks.
I keep hearing the discussion that people are called Italian Americans and all other kinds of Americans, and therefore it would be appropriate to say African Americans. But then you see, Italy is a country, not a continent. Africa is a continent. So perhaps we should say Nigerian Americans or Jamaican Americans or what have you. Black Americans would encompass all of us.
How many of you have heard about this debate about the identification of black versus African American? Have any of you heard about that? At the David Ellis Elementary School in Roxbury, we asked 4th and 5th grade students and their teachers what term they preferred.
Whatever they call you, African or black, it doesn't matter because you know what you are inside.
There shouldn't be any connotation after for the race.
If it's Afro-Americans black, would it also be England black?
I call it brown.
You call it brown.
Well, it doesn't really matter because you know who you are.
It'll move some of us to think about our African roots and begin to do our family history. And I think that all black young people particularly, and middle-aged and older people, need to continue to look at their family history.
You can see that I'm an African person. We should teach that to our children strenuously. We should always acknowledge it. We should be proud of it. Whether or not we're Americans is a sometime thing. All black people in this country are not Americans. All black people in this country are black. Let's unite.
For the 10 o'clock news, I'm Marcus Jones.
So the terms have changed over the years. First it was Negro, then it was African American, and then it was black. A lot of people think Jesse Jackson is the reason why people use the term African American, and it is not. In 1988, yes, Jesse did have a national black agenda, and in his agenda he did want to so-called not be called black anymore, but use the term African American because he felt that the term black is culturally offensive. He said to be called African American has cultural integrity. It puts us in our proper historical context. Every ethnic group in this country has a reference to some land base, some historical culture base. African Americans have hit that level of cultural maturity. There are Armenian Americans and Jewish Americans and Arab Americans and Italian Americans, and with a degree of accepted and reasonable pride, they connect their heritage to their mother country and where they are now. The term African American did not start in 1988. It has been around way longer than you would believe. The first immigrants seem to have used the word African. There are even surviving documents that they refer to themselves as blacks and Africans. For example, in this ad, you can see in the Pennsylvania Journal on May 15, 1782, he used the term African American to describe himself. There's also another document that was found, and it was stored in Harvard's library, and in this document you will see that the author referred to himself as an African American man as well, and this was cited back in April of 1782, and it was published in Philadelphia. There were also other institutions that were organized by Americans of the African descent who designated the term African in the name, such as the Free African Society, also the African Methodist Episcopal Church, and also the African Baptist Church. Now this is going to begin the controversial part. You guys, Christopher Columbus did not discover America, and we can all kind of agree on that. If not, just do a little more research on Christopher Columbus and America before Christopher Columbus. And contrary to popular belief, but African American history did not start with slavery in the New World, which was the Americas, what we call the United States. An overwhelming body of evidence have been emerging which the Africans frequently sailed across the Atlantic to the Americans thousands of years before Christopher Columbus was even thought of. To go more into detail, you can read The Game Before Columbus, The African Presence in Ancient America and Africa, and The Discovery of America for more details, but I'm just going to glaze over it a little bit. The great ancient civilization of Egypt and West Africa traveled to the Americas, and they contributed to the American civilization. They imported art, pyramid buildings, political systems, and religious practices such as mathematics, writing, and sophisticated calendars. The strongest evidence of African presence in America before Christopher Columbus comes from Christopher Columbus himself. In Mr. Leo's book, Africa and the Discovery of America, he explained that Christopher Columbus noted in his journal that Native Americans confirmed black-skinned people had come from the southeast in boats trading in gold-tipped spears. It was also found that a ratio of the properties of gold, copper, and silver and alloy were identical to the spears that had been forged in West Africa. Egyptian artifacts in North America also shows there was presence of Africans in America. King Ramses III led a team of Africans at sea with astonishing seafaring and navigational skills. Together, both accounts would point to Africans sailing over to the New World before Columbus. Constructing pyramids was a highly specialized and complicated task that took the ancient Egyptians a lot of time to master. According to historians, it would be impossible for any group of people to have built those same complex pyramids without going through the same progression. According to Professor Ever Borders, they noted the presence of completed pyramids in Levita in Mexico. According to Borders, it's a sign that Africans, having already mastered the construction of pyramids in Egypt, sailed over to the New World and constructed these dual-purpose tombs and temples in the Americas. There also have been many instances where they have discovered skulls and skeletons that were clearly believed to belong to people of the African descent. These skeletons have been discovered throughout Central America and South America, with even being under earth in what is now California. Historians also believe that there were a lot of similarities in Native American and African religions, and that also suggests that Africans had to have had an early contact with Native Americans by sailing to the New World way before Columbus stumbled upon the Native Americans' land. There were prominent figures with dark skin and coarse hair throughout their religion. Today, many surviving portraits reveal these people who were clearly crafted in the likeness of Africans. Historians also point to a wall painting in the caves of South America that depicted the ancient Egyptian open of the mouth and cross libations rituals. A lot of people like to debunk the narrative, saying that there was no way that Africans could have made it to the New World because they didn't have any skills or resources to sail across the Atlantic. And that is completely false. Historians have discovered evidence that suggests Africans were masters at building ships and that it was actually a part of their tradition. Shipbuilding and sailing are over 20,000 years old in Sahara, and cave wall paintings of ancient ships were displayed in National Geographic magazines years ago. With those shipbuilding skills and the navigation skills that were noted by other historians of that time, the myth that Africans wouldn't have been able to sail to the New World have officially been debunked. The Olmec civilization was the first significant civilization in Mesoamerica and deemed mother culture of Mexico by some historians. This civilization, dominated by Africans, is best known for the carved heads in central Mexico that serve as even more evidence that Africans sailed to the New World. The heads are clearly crafted in the likeness of Africans. The same civilization that created these giant heads were also responsible for introducing written language, arts, sophisticated astronomy, and mathematics to Mesoamerican civilization. So the word black gained its power back in the mid-1950s. During this time, Black people were fighting to vote. They were fighting to be equal. They wanted opportunities such as employment, housing, and education, and they did exactly what they had to do in order to fight. During this time, they really embraced the word black. Before being called black, a lot of us were referred to as colored or Negro. And during the civil rights movement, they wanted to steer away from that offensive term, put power into the term black. Now, the issue that people are having in 2019, people feel that there is no cultural context in the word black. They feel that black is a color, not an ethnicity. And some people feel like the term black is actually derogatory. You guys, let me know what you feel down below in the comment section. I would love to know your thoughts on that one. I personally believe that black people are from all over the world. I really hate the topic of race because I believe that there's one race, and that's the human race. Now, as far as ethnicity, you know, that's when I started to think about African Americans, and me knowing that Africans were here in America way before, you know, the colonizers came. You know, it makes me understand the term African American a little more. You guys let me know down below your thoughts and your opinions. What do you identify with, and what are your thoughts about what this man said to Amara by saying that she prefers to identify as Afro-Latina?